Hi everyone, welcome to Friday Book Bites. I am so excited today that I am being joined by my special guest, Joanna Nell. Hi Joanna, thank you for joining me today on Friday.
Hi. Oh, thanks, Sandy. It's wonderful to be here, and hi to everybody who's watching.
So Joanna and I are going to talk about silver-haired protagonists today. But before we do that, we've got two things we have to get out of the way. The first is the details of our giveaway. So for anyone who asks a question or leaves a comment, either now during the live stream or if you're watching this back, the competition will stay open until midday Sydney time on Saturday. You will go into the draw to win a copy of Joanna's next book, which comes out on Tuesday. Is that right, Joanna?
That's right. Yeah, Tuesday.
The Great Escape from Woodlands Nursing Home. And I will actually be seeing Joanna in person on Wednesday. So I'm hoping Joanna might be kind enough to sign the copy for the winner, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yes, I'd be delighted to.
Fantastic. So, silver-haired protagonists. Now, before we get into that, Jo and I have both been embracing our silver over the last few months, and we're going to have a bit of a silver off. So I'm going to bring us a bit closer into the screen here. And, okay, there's Jo's hair. She's doing a lovely little display.
Okay. There we go.
Oh, yes. Underneath
yeah.
it's taking off.
Yeah, it's really.
All right,
Yeah,
now
it's
here's
getting there, isn't it?
my
Oh, that's
silver.
looking good.
Yes, there we go. That's my silver coming through.
Beautiful.
What was the reason you decided to embrace your silver, Jo?
Well, I suppose like a lot of people, I think it was practicality in the beginning. I think at the beginning of lockdown, I just couldn't get to the hairdresser. And, I'd been going every 6 weeks for like the last 150 years to have my hair coloured. And I just couldn't get in. So as the regrowth came through, I realised how, really silver it was. And I thought, okay, I've been thinking about it a little while. It's this sort of thing where as soon as you start thinking about it, you see it everywhere. And I was starting to see a lot of women of a certain age with beautiful sort of grey and silver and white and every shade of hair. And I thought, no, this might be a good time to do it. I must admit, I did lose my nerve about May. And I put a colour on myself, a home colour, and it was a disaster. It turned my hair green. So that I was even more determined after that to do it. So it's been something I've been thinking about for a while, just perhaps in time to embrace a new thing. But I think it's something that you may or may not be ready to do. And I know that there's a lot of women who will continue to colour their hair, until their dying day. And I think ultimately it's a woman's choice to do it. So I think if that's what you want to do, if you want to stop dyeing your hair, fantastic. If you want to continue dyeing your hair, fantastic. I think don't let anyone influence you or tell you otherwise. I don't know if that was your sort of experience as well, Sandy.
Yeah, I made the decision last Christmas, actually, before the pandemic even hit. And for me, it was about the time and the money that goes into continuously dyeing your hair. And I was so over it. And then the other aspect for me, and again, this is where, as women, it is our choice and we make these decisions based on where we are in our own lives. For me, it was about not being ashamed anymore of the fact that I'm getting older. It's happening and it happens to all of us. And I think that I kind of had a mind shift within myself where I was like, I actually should be proud of the fact that A, I've lived this long, and B, that I've earned every single one of these silver hairs, through good things and tragic times and everything that life throws at you. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to see what happens, and I can always go back if I decide I hate it. I can always get to the hairdresser, and it's not as scary as I thought it was going to be.
I think it's quite exciting, actually. And look, I totally agree with that sort of, embracing that aging thing, because I certainly, through writing and everything that I talk about, I try to be, influence positive aging. And there was always this sort of part of me who thought, well, you're dyeing your hair, you're actually covering up the, one of the physical manifestations of aging. And so, I think it was important to me as well to sort of, walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Yes, but the money and the time was also another factor. And my husband quite likes it, actually. We did sort of have an agreement beforehand that if it got to the stage where it was, really dreadful, that we might have some sort of safe word that he could say, but actually he just keeps looking at it and saying, this is fantastic, this is fantastic. So I think he quite likes the idea of maybe a new look.
Oh dear. Cassie's left us a comment saying that it's called Aging Gracefully, and that the two of us are nailing it. She's still spending hours in the hairdressers looking like an alien with bits of foil in her hair.
Yeah, the full tinfoil hat. It's
I guess, and as you said, we all get there or don't get there in our own time. My mum dyed her hair, oh gosh, up until about a year ago, and she's just turned 74. So it's one of those things that, is a very personal choice. Tracy said that her sisters went grey in their 30s, and so they're still covering up. I think I had my first one when I was 27, my first grey hair.
Yes, that's right. My mother's a hairdresser, actually, so she has been dyeing her hair for 60 years, and sadly I haven't seen her since Christmas, so it'll be quite a while, I think, before I can get back to see her. She's over in the UK, so I think she'll have quite a surprise, whether she'll agree with it or not, or I don't know, we'll see.
Oh dear. And I'm just going to pop up a comment just to boost my own ego here, Joe. I'm sorry to hijack this. From Leanne, who said that I don't look a day older than 21. You are my new best friend, Leanne. Thank you.
Yeah.
See what I can feel a hell of a lot older than 21. This actually leads us nicely into the topic of today's discussion, and that is the older protagonist in novels. And there seems to be a bit of a movement at the moment where, whether it's in multi-generational stories like mine or stories like yours, where the older protagonist is front and center for the entire story, they seem to be really popular. Do you have any insight as to why perhaps they're having their moment?
I mean, it's difficult to say. Certainly when I started writing my first novel, which was probably around 2015 or 16, there weren't very many books around with older protagonists. I mean, certainly if there were, they were largely from a male point of view. A Man Called Ove, the 100-Year-Old Man That Climbed Out of the Window, those sorts of books, with a few notable exceptions. And I wrote my story not with age in mind at all, but really it was a character-driven story, and this just happened to be the character, and my character happened to live in a retirement village. And perhaps that was no surprise when I look back and sort of dissect it. But at the time, I wrote it with no sort of sense that it would be published, because I thought no one is actually going to want to read or probably publish a book with two 79-year-old women as the main protagonists. But it did seem that, once I'd had a little bit of feedback from people and had a little bit of encouragement, that I think I was just extremely perhaps looking to see what stories hadn't been told, or looking for something new. And so I think I was sort of lucky in that sense. And then I think going on from the popularity of those stories, I mean, there are as many stories involving older protagonists as there are people, really, because in one way it is a genre of its own, but in another way it's not. You can write a crime, a romance, a comedy, whatever. It just happens to be that person is an older protagonist. And I think it's something that previously I think we've seen something as aging that needs to be hidden away somehow, in a sort of denialist way. We've certainly always been a youth-obsessed culture, and perhaps even more so with social media. But the generations, I think, that are aging now, particularly, our Gen Xers, who are just embracing our silver, and the baby boomers, perhaps not as going to go as quietly as previous generations, who perhaps I would call the Stoic generation, particularly those who perhaps had either fought a war or been born during a war. So my parents and my grandparents' generation, which are the people that I tend to write my stories about. So I think it was sort of an undercurrent that has sort of become a wave, and hopefully, we'll see much more of it, including, stories that are written by people at that stage of life as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting that when you mentioned the youth-obsessed culture, and I was, not trawling on the internet instead of doing my edits the other day, and I came across a story about Keanu Reeves, and we all know and love Keanu Reeves, and he's very, very private in his private life, and there were pictures of his, and I'm not sure if it's a girlfriend or a wife or who she is, but his partner, and she is exactly the same age as Keanu, but she has embraced her silver, and the comments were just, it was really quite horrendous. What are you doing with someone that old? You should get a younger girlfriend, all those sorts of things. They're the same age, but she happened to, like you and I, embrace her silver. And I think that the more novels we have like yours that show us these protagonists, in an interesting and fun and wonderful light, the better it will be.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Keanu Reeves is actually following me on social media this week, which I'm quite happy about. Yeah,
the real
but
Keanu.
I think who knows? But I think you raised an interesting point there, and I think that actually highlights the double standard of aging. And feminists and feminist writers like Susan Sontag have been banging on about this since the 70s. Really, this double standard of aging, in which aging enhances men. So. Yes. Embrace the silver fox, wise and powerful, and women, are punished really by aging. You're expected to stay young and beautiful and reproductive, and then when your childbearing years are over, you're supposed to just disappear quietly and make way for another sort of younger one. And look, hopefully that this is something that we're not going to see it as much. Hopefully this is a relic of the past. But, women have I think they've been emboldened by this sort of, double whammy of both ageism and sexism, if you like. And so I think if you look at a lot of the sort of, I suppose I'd call them activists, really, people like Ashton Applewhite. She's my absolute hero. I've got her book here, when she did her tour in Australia. So, and we're seeing some wonderful role models for old age, and a lot of fantastic women, as role models for aging. I mean, you don't have to look at Iris Apfel is one that that people think of, the fashion icon with her huge glasses. I mean, I think she's about 96 now, 97, and one of my personal favorites is the Eileen Kramer, who's 105, and she's still a dancer and a choreographer and a writer, and she's taken up art and whatever. And so we're seeing these wonderful role models. And I think that women particularly are leading this, what we call silver disobedience, if you like, this sort of silver revolution. It's really exciting to be part of that. And so I suppose there's a bit of that in my novels, is that my characters, they're presented with a problem and which they overcome. And in this case, I think the antagonist in all my novels is ageism, and those sort of outdated stereotypes and myths that need to be debunked. So I think we're going to see aging in a totally different light moving forward.
I certainly hope so. Just a couple of comments before we move on to the next question. Tracy says that you write great older protagonists, and I would have to agree with her there. Caroline has said that Mrs. Henry Parker is her most favourite book ever, in capital letters.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely to hear.
Janet says that damn tootin', we're not going quietly.
Fantastic.
That's and she, oh sorry, this is another one, I'm just reading the comments here. Janet said that she asked a male hairdresser to tint her hair and he refused, said it would spoil it. There you go.
There so we've got
a supporter there.
He's a keeper.
So you've touched on a couple of things there, but I wanted to explore a little bit more within your novels, even though on the surface there are some light-hearted, I guess, settings and plot points. You know, love in a retirement village, you know, an old lady wandering the ship that she's always lived on, or busting out of the nursing home. On the surface, that's quite light-hearted and fun. But when you get into it, you definitely explore much deeper themes and excuse me, and layers within that. And I wanted to ask you how you tackle those themes. And I'm particularly thinking of Mrs. Henry Parker, who Caroline just mentioned there, you know, where we're dealing with something as horrendous as dementia. How do you deal with those heavy themes with honesty and the darkness that they come with, but in a way that is still for the reader, you know, lighthearted and a rollicking good read?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something I suppose that I always have at the back of my mind, and even if I can't sort of answer that, you know, succinctly, but I think what I have at the front of my mind is that I'm writing for the reader, you know, and at its core, I believe that fiction, that the main role of fiction is to entertain, but I think it's also can you know, shine a light on deeper issues, and you know, hold a mirror up to ourselves as well. We often see ourselves within stories and characters, but you know, certainly the kind of books that I want to write, I want to primarily entertain, but you know, and I think that's where the humor is helpful. You know, life is full of humor, and I call it life's accidental comedy. I mean, perhaps I just have an ear or an eye for that, and you know, it's around us all the time. And I think that what that does is, you know, in books, the real world is exaggerated, you know, and in the books that I write, you know, I take elements of what is real, what I have observed, you know, in many years of, you know, working in retirement villages or nursing homes, or, you know, having many older role models in my life. And you exaggerate that to a degree. But also you need to sort of feel that emotion in a bodily sense. And I think that can sometimes lead to, you know, getting to those darker emotional places. And if you like, that's throwing the reader down the well. But what you need to do is then sort of drag them back up again. Otherwise, they're just going to put down the book and go, my goodness, this is just too depressing. And it might win a prize, but you know, that's just too depressing. So that's why I think it comes in. I feel like a bit like a painter, really, you know, with the dark and the shade. And so sort of lightening that moment, it's something that I've, you know, always used to try and put people at their ease, if you like. That's a sort of bit of a people pleaser thing, and I use it in my job as a doctor, is sometimes, you know, reflecting back a little bit of the you know, the humor in it, and allowing people to see that. And I think it just makes it more palatable, if you like. It's like you know, a sauce on something that's not quite so pleasant. You could probably actually take that in. And you know, what I wanted to do was create a feeling. I wanted to take the reader on a journey down through all those places, which were, you know, we're dealing with illness and, you know, frailty and loss and grief and all those things that are part of life anyway, but particularly part perhaps at the end of life. Take them on that journey, but to leave them at the end with a feeling of optimism and hope, and you know, and perhaps they'll remember the feeling of perhaps having a bit of a smile or a bit of a chuckle at that. And so it's, I don't know if I do it. I hope that I get that balance right. It's something that's just always there, but it's the humor. I've always enjoyed humor and reading humor, and I think it just naturally, you know, perhaps comes into the writing.
Oh, you absolutely do find that balance. And Tracy has left a comment here that the last voyage of Mrs. Henry Parker made her both laugh and cry. And I think that's the beauty of your novels. And as you said, if it's too depressing, we will put the book down. And I think that's why we need that balance, and it gets us talking like it has today. There are a few comments and questions that I'm going to pop up for us to have a look at. If I can find it, there was one here from Cassie. Cassie would like to know if your writing process has changed or evolved with each book.
Oh, that's a good question, Cassie. And I think it does. I think the process changes a little bit with each book because you learn so much. The first book, I spent years writing that, really, from the very first time I started, embracing the writing and wanting to do it, give it some priority in my life. So it took me maybe 4 years to write the first book. And I learned an awful lot along the way. I suppose what I've learned is it's really like the skeleton of it. I know which bones go where. I know, that the head goes there and the legs go there. But that needs to be built on. And so in some ways it's easier knowing where I need to be, where the plot points need to be, where the beats need to be. But it's harder because I have so many other rules in my head now. You've got this sort of checklist of, is the character arc going? Is the emotional wound there? Are we increasing the tension on every page? There are all these things that I feel like a little voice is going on in my head. So what I have to try and do in some ways is get the essence of that, that joy of just writing that first novel, where none of this, I didn't know any of this then. I just wrote from the heart. And first draft, for me, I just do that. I know a lot of writers who find first drafts of new novels really hard to put up with because you've probably spent months, if not years, sort of refining and editing the last book, particularly if it's got up to, publication. And then you go back to really a blank page again. And what I've learned is to just push through that first draft. And my husband always says, oh, I know when you're in first draft mode and, you're full of woe and angst. And I think my writing group identify this too. And I just know I have to push that through. So first draft is my draft. It's just my messy, me telling the story. And then second draft, I actually do a complete rewrite, really. I take, bits of that first draft and do a rewrite. And then after that, so I have my drafts and I know where I am. So yeah, the process has changed quite a lot, Cassie. But I try and hold on to the essence of the joyous bit of writing that feeling of writing the first novel.
Liz says that doing the first draft is great because there are no rules. And that's true. And Cassie said she's nodding a lot right now.
Yes.
And I think I was too. We've got another comment here from Cassie that is very much a part of the world we're living in right now, that in COVID there's been a lot of distressing attitude expressed that this is an old person's virus and that in some way the older lives aren't as important as those of the young, and it's awful. What's your take on this?
Oh, look, that's something that has upset me.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt.
Yeah,
people who may not know, Jo is also a medical doctor.
So, look, firstly, I would debunk that and say that it's not just an old person's disease. Anybody of any age can catch this. And we're seeing some serious illness and we're seeing some deaths in younger people. They may have a stronger immune systems, but they often fall victim to an overactive immune response. And the same with children. We're seeing some really, sad cases of loss in children. So I'd sort of debunk that. Yes, old people are more vulnerable. And what has been so distressing to me is the idea that, that we should really sacrifice old lives because, well, they're close to dying anyway. Well, how close do you need to be for your life not to be worth anything? And this is just this, it's just this entrenched and casual ageism that we see. And if this was a disease that primarily affected and took the lives of young people or children, we would be having a completely different conversation. It's really like old people are expendable. And so I think it's really brought about a great division, actually, and exposed our ageism here. And look, I won't get into the the politics of lockdown and COVID and everything, but all I will say is that that I think that the main thing is that COVID has uncovered or highlighted the cracks in aged care that have been a long time coming. And in some ways, that's the way it's happened is not a good thing. But if this is what it took for us to really say this our aged care system is truly in trouble, that perhaps there will be a silver lining. But no, I've been absolutely heartbroken with some of those attitudes. Yeah, it's terrible.
Do you think this is a turning point for us to be able to use what we've seen through this pandemic to change our attitudes to this expendability of the older population, and hopefully that we can value them? They've got so much wisdom and experience, and
absolutely,
it really has shown the best and the worst of humanity, hasn't it, this pandemic?
Oh, it certainly has. Yes. No. And look, I hope so. I think we were already, with the Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety, the interim report of that was delivered in October 2019, before the pandemic hit. And, really the headline of that was a shocking state of neglect. So, and the aged care industry has been, this has been a problem that has been building for decades and decades, and certainly generations of politicians. It's been thrown around like a sort of political football into one too hot basket after another. It's changed portfolios goodness knows how many times, and tends to be given to a junior minister who moves on to something else. It's never been worthy of a minister for aged care. Has never been worthy of a cabinet position. And so, look, there was already, a little bit of a sense that we had to see the worst of it before we could really open our eyes and give this some priority and move forward. But unfortunately, with COVID, it's been heartbreaking. But there's another level of sort of ageism, and here an interesting thing is how few of the people in aged care, their families came and got them and took them home to look after them at home. There was a lot of outrage, that this is happening, and that. But I think that look, I think this has got to be the beginning of something completely different.
Liz has got a comment based on this, that there are no geriatricians that actually sit on the New South Wales Health COVID team. I find that staggering.
Yeah, well, yes. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all, actually. There was no national response. And I know Liz works in aged care, and she's certainly familiar with all of this, but there was no national response. It was up to individual care homes to say if they were ready or not. And it's they've really just been thrown under the bus. And certainly one of the things I wanted to highlight in the book set in the nursing home is that the people on the ground, the workers, the nurses, the assistants in nursing, the people who actually work and care in care homes, are doing their best largely. There are always going to be some bad apples, and there are going to be a few people who perhaps for them that's not the ideal profession, but largely people are doing their best. And the industry has survived or exploited the goodwill of largely a female workforce. I mean, we can't ignore this, really. I think this is another political. This has to become political. It's a casualized workforce, and I think this constant bombardments with messages that these are terrible places where there's a fate worse than death to enter an aged care facility is incredibly insulting to the people, and demoralizing to a workforce is already demoralized. It really is the system and management and the profit structure of aged care that is behind this. But I just wanted to give a shout out to all the many wonderful caring people who work in that industry, who really put the care in the care industry. So let's not forget them.
No. And as you said, The Great Escape from Woodlands Nursing Home is set in a nursing home. And it sounds like a rollicking good tale. And Liz is excited to see this book to give us all a lift with your beautiful balance of hitting those hard issues and those light-hearted moments. What can we expect from this book that comes out next week, Jo?
Well, I hope that readers will obviously take away the message, which is a sort of recurring theme in my book, that that it's never too late to enjoy life and make friends, and in this one particularly embrace a new community. And it's told from the point of view of Hattie, who's a reclusive nature writer who's really shunned people in favour of birds her whole life until a fall puts her into rehabilitation and respite in a nursing home. And Walter, who is turning 90, he's a retired driving instructor who's just failed his mobility scooter test. And how these two complete opposites, along with obviously a cast of colourful characters, really try to overcome the system, I suppose. I mean, it's one of those where I've tried to point out the ridiculousness of the system. There is a strong thread of the ironies and paradoxes of the health and safety that when people are go into aged care, they see it as it's a safe option. You go in there because it's safe. You need to be safe. Sadly, what we're seeing, it's not always safe. But I think along with that is recognizing people's rights to independence and freedom, particularly independence to make their own decisions and choices about things. And so I felt that to open up this conversation, I wanted to go right inside inside with the residents, tell it from their point of view as best hopefully as I could, but not sugarcoat it. I wanted to pack in a lot of the and really make people think about their own futures and think, how will I react in, is it 20, 30, 40 years time, when somebody is telling me that I have to go to bed at 6 o'clock at night, or that this is what's for dinner, or that this is what I have to do, when this is what I have to wear, this is when I have to shower. And this is all to keep a structure in place in somewhere like, where you have institutionalized care. But we're not going to change things unless we start thinking about them. And this is the one thing that's going to happen to all of us if we're lucky enough not to, if we're lucky enough to live that long anyway.
Yeah, this actually leads beautifully into Janet's comment that she'll be 81 next week. Happy birthday, Janet.
Happy birthday.
And lighthearted is great, but please be careful not to be patronising, which I can assure you, Janet, Joanna is definitely
absolutely yes
in her novels. Yes. And I think we've just touched on that then with the, giving them the freedom to make their own choices and that sort of
so I did want to actually include some patronisation in the book. That was important for the characters to experience. That's not my opinion, but what I wanted to do was them to and through the eyes of the character, hopefully to experience patronisation and that paternalistic attitude, and to by exaggerating it, to point it out or poke fun at it, or to call it out. So, but yes, I mean, it's always a thin line to tread, and I hope that my books are not patronising, but I'm sure people will tell me if we cross the line at all.
Yeah, no, they're definitely not. We've got a couple of other people in the chat here that have also worked in aged care. Darlene, excuse me, her mother nursed for over 40 years in an aged care facility, and Darlene has nursed herself for 24 years, and she's very much looking forward to reading your books. And Yvonne has a positive experience. Her husband has been in aged care for 6 years and is receiving excellent care. So that's really
I think that's the thing, is that certainly I have seen some excellent care. I have witnessed the good, bad, and the ugly. But I think if it's possible to give excellent care and good care, then that should be the gold standard, that everybody is entitled to excellent care.
Absolutely. So in your experience, both as a writer and as a doctor, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that the general public might have of older people, and how do you tackle that then in your novels?
I think that there's a general misconception they're just not capable, that, you know, they mistake, you know, physical slowness for inability to, you know, look after them, just basically, you know, to wash and dress and feed. And I think, you know, particularly in an aged care facility, yeah, there's a lot of people who do need help, but I think that what we need to do is foster you know, and encourage independence. So I think that the other misconception is that, you know, somehow change, just because you change your address and suddenly you're not living at, you know, X address, that you now move into residential aged care, that somehow you've changed as a person. And, you know, what I wanted to do in the book was illustrate how, you know, a change, you know, people's personalities don't really change, but how they have to adapt to a new environment. And I think there's a sort of a misquote of Darwin that says, it doesn't, I think this is actually purported that he said in The Origin of Species, it's not the strongest species that survives, but those that are most capable of change. And I think that, you know, what I wanted to illustrate was that people are still capable of adjusting to new environments, and in the case of, you know, my very reclusive character, embracing friendship and community, and allowing herself to get to know other people for the first time in her life. So and also there are some people who absolutely thrive in aged care as well. I've seen people who have been struggling to live at home or haven't been supported to live at home, which is really is, you know, should be the what we all aspire to. But when they come into aged care, some people do so well with good nutrition and care and that sense of, you know, community and connection, that I actually have helped people to escape. There was one lady who did so well when she came in. She came in after a crisis in her life, that I actually encouraged her to move out of the nursing home and to buy her own independent living unit, which she did. So the misconception is that it's just somewhere that people go to die. Yep. I mean, it's obviously somewhere where people do go when they are, you know, reaching the end of their lives, and obviously those care needs in the last few months are higher. But you know, I also want to say that it's a place where people can really change and thrive actually too.
You used a phrase earlier in our chat, which I'm in love with now, which was silver disobedience. I love it. Yeah. Are Hattie and Walter in the Great Escape from Woodlands nursing home part of that civil disobedience movement?
Oh, definitely. I think so. I think one of the common traits of all my characters is that they don't always toe the line. And, you know, we could wonder where that comes from in my life. I think I was always such a goody two shoes. I was such a people pleaser and, you know, always did the right thing when I was little. And maybe this is my kind of, you know, my chance to sort of push back against that, if you like. Because I think that, you know, unless people challenge the status quo or question why something is happening, you know, it just basically doesn't change. And you know, in fiction, the real money is in conflict, isn't it? You know, so yes. What you want to do is to put someone in a situation, and you can be really quite cruel to characters. I mean, I put my characters in the most terrible situation, you know, their own version of a personal hell, if you like. And it's really up to them, because I suppose what I tell is sort of an underdog stories really is, you know, someone who is on the surface of it oppressed by something, whether it's a person or an attitude or you know, an institution, and get them to push back about and to ultimately triumph over that. So that's what puts the fun in it. That's what I love about writing these characters.
Absolutely. Darlene has left us a comment that she keeps telling her mum, who worked for 40 years in aged care, to write a book because the antics in the story that she's told her over time are hilarious and seem unbelievable in terms of what used to go on.
Yes, a lot more. Yeah, I'm sure.
Fiction.
Exactly, that's the thing. You can imagine a publisher saying, "Well, this would never happen." And you go, "Well, it does happen. It does happen." So yeah, please encourage her to do that.
All right, I'm going to start wrapping this up, but before we say goodbye, I'm going to put up the details of where you can find Joanna online and the 3 beautiful covers of her 3 gorgeous books. As I said, The Great Escape from Woodlands Nursing Home comes out on Tuesday, which we're all very excited about. I have an advanced copy, which I adore, so I've been very lucky. Penelope has left a comment that says, embracing friendship and community is a very good description of your novel. So that's lovely. And we've got one last question here from Chrissy. Chrissy's mother is 83 next week and is so anti-nursing homes and assisted living arrangements that she cannot be convinced. Do you think that reading your book might open her mind to other options? That's a great question, Chrissy.
It's a really good question. And that is partly why I wrote the book too, because for a lot of people, there isn't a choice. There isn't a practical choice. And there are a lot of people who are facing this choice with fear and trepidation. And so part of wanting to write this story was to, hopefully make it a little bit more palatable and to show a slightly different side. So I do, yes, hopefully if she reads the book, she might see that there's still a little bit of life and fun and happiness to be had.
Absolutely. There you go, Chrissy. Hit the shops next Tuesday for your mum. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jo, and thank you to our audience who have put some lovely questions and comments up. Are you doing any live events, or are they all still a bit vetoed at the moment?
Yes, doing a few live events. I think the main one is next Thursday, Books and Bubbles, which is run by Hachette in conjunction with Who magazine. So I shall be doing an interview. It's you can find it on my social media page or Google, and bring your own bubbles and come and hear a few stories.
Excellent. And just in case you missed it before, here are the details to find Jo and if she's got any events coming up. And I can highly recommend all 3 of her novels. Thank you so much for joining me today, Joanna, and have a great weekend. And I can't wait to see you in person on Wednesday and get some
fantastic
books signed.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for
everyone.
for having me, Sandy, and thanks everyone for the lovely questions and for the support. Thank you.